This is Illiterate. My name is Evan. I watched a movie.
My name is Taylor, and I read some stuff.
This week, we are doing our second part on James Bond. No Time to Die is out. I've seen it twice, and I can't believe I'm saying that. It's fascinating to study, but it's never been one of my favorite things. And I'm now saying, like, yeah, it might be my favorite of the Daniel Craig films. I'm pretty gobsmacked. So I am stoked that we are back here today to be going through who James Bond really is, who he's been through all of the decades, so that we can get to the heart of why saying goodbye to Daniel Craig right now means so much to so many people, because it really does. And man, it means something to me, and I can't believe that I'm really feeling that right now.
You know, there's the age-old argument that we can't possibly, that's not the purpose, to say, oh, who's the best Bond? Not our opinion to tease out, but instead why they are what they are, what made them that way.
I'm amazed that this ball is still in play. This is the longest running cinematic franchise. So how did this ball get moved forward step by step?
And the dollar signs don't lie.
No, they do not.
Inflation-adjusted total revenue is almost $15 billion for all the movies combined. That's ticket sales. It's hard to quantify, so I found a website that has, if all was equal, every day, James Bond would be making $683,000 a day.
Wow.
And then per minute, $474. Per second, almost $8. If you spread it out over from 62 when the first one came out to now, it'd be James Bond is making $8 a second. So
well, he kind of lives like he does.
Yeah. So that's why we're talking about this.
If the dollar signs had waned, this franchise would have been gone decades and decades ago. There is something about this franchise and this character that keeps people coming back. And what I've realized now, saying goodbye to Daniel Craig, is I'm seeing my friends, myself, now involved in his iteration of this character. Now we're invested in this franchise. And going forward, they will cast another James Bond. And now we're in the fight. Now we're invested. Now we like this. We grew up with this. Now we'll always be comparing everything else to that. Now we're like all the people that loved all of the other James Bonds. Here we are. It happened to us. We were assimilated.
So
I watched it. It's a beautiful thing. I've watched that happen kind of this like last weekend as the movie came out. And I'm like, oh man, now we've been folded into this. Now I kind of get this a little more, because I'm saying goodbye to my James Bond.
He gets the hype.
Yeah.
Let's keep in mind, as we go back into the history, if you can imagine a graph, x-axis is time, y-axis is how much money they made. There's a steep rocket launch when it first comes out, and then a gentle sort of slope down to nothing, and then it hits its lowest in 89, and then coming back up, and it's gone back up and up and up. To now. So just keep that in mind as we talk about this timeline. Yeah. I'll let you know where it hits. But that's kind of what the history of James Bond looks like in terms of popularity defined by money. So that's
fascinating.
Let's start with where we ended off last time. I did have sort of a correction. I had said that JFK had said, he loves James Bond. That is true. I wanted to clarify that the novels were doing well in Britain. It was that the novels weren't doing well abroad in the US. So that's why it created a bump. Because like we said, it was like, well, the novels were doing well, but the films weren't being made. Why is that the case? Because it wasn't
catching on in the States.
Appeal.
And so suddenly if the president mentions it, then it starts.
Yes.
That makes sense.
The earliest point we had mentioned also was a TV movie that came out in 1954, sold the rights to CBS for almost $10,000 in today's dollars. Not that much. But Fleming is hard at work trying to get this made into something. So he initially wrote his own script for Dr. No as an outline for TV, sort of even as a side way to promote the Jamaican tourism industry.
Sick. You gotta finance these things somehow.
Right. But that fell through. He ended up with a producer, this guy, Harry Saltzman, and his name will come back throughout. But he's sold the rights of all the novels except Casino Royale, because he had already sold it, for $50,000 is what I saw.
Okay.
Albert Broccoli is the name, and forever and always it says an Eon film by Albert Broccoli. I always laughed at that when I saw them. It's like, why is it still? Because he's been the producer, and now his daughter is the producer, and they're the producers forever.
Wow.
Saltzman didn't really have much in terms of production. He had done some stage plays and whatnot. So they agreed to work together kind of as rivals, because they both wanted to do it, but one had the material, one had the ability. And so then they form Eon Productions, and thus forth forever, the production company.
That's fascinating. This is the people behind the curtain shepherding this whole thing. So it's interesting to get it, because now I remember the buzz when Daniel Craig was cast and how the impetus put on that and the rollout of actually saying he was going to be it is one of the most lavish Hollywood affairs that you can basically have. So that's who is in charge of it, is, these people behind the curtain. And now it's a very lauded, rich curtain with Aston Martins and amazing alcohol and all those sorts of things. So it's amazing to just start to wrench down on exactly who are the people in charge of James Bond.
Yeah, it's always been in the Broccoli family from the very beginning. They've held the keys to the kingdom for it. So they're going to do the first one, which they wanted to do Thunderball, because that was the big book that had come out just then. Right. But there's copyright issues with it, as we had said before. And so they're continuing to dispute, because Fleming kind of stole the idea from the screenwriters and then wrote his own novel. So they're like, we can't deal with this right now. We'll do Dr. No. And thus forth, also starting from the beginning, it's like there's no bearing on the sequence of when they decide to do what story. It's not chronological with the novels. It's just all over the place. None of that matters.
They're just trying to make one right now.
Right, Dr. No.
And it was make a movie.
Absolutely all over the place as far as the writing of it, honing down the story. There was a draft, and Dr. No, at one point, he had been changed to literally a marmoset, a type of monkey, as that was the mastermind villain. So the original screenwriter left, said this is going to be a disaster.
Oh my God.
One of the things that was disastrous to Ian Fleming, because he's still around when this one's out, the casting of Sean Connery.
Really?
We had mentioned, even though he's kind of in the books a bit more cold-blooded, blunt instrument was the terminology. Yes. He still thought muscular 6'2" Sean Connery, he called him, quote, an overgrown stuntman. Ian Fleming thought he still should be suave. David Niven, this,
So he thought that Connery was a bit too manly, too big, too big.
Too brutish, too,
Yes. He's a Viking. He's a Viking of a man. Put him in a tuxedo.
Doesn't work. Yeah, David Niven is like, thin mustache, still sipping martinis, a vessel of the British government, but not this, hulk of a person, completely knuckle dragging, etc. So,
well, I mean, that definitely became a lot of their work. The filmmakers, when they set out to put Connery in front of the camera, is to actually make him fit in the frame and naturally fit in the frame, to make him suave, to make him luxurious, because
make him more promiscuous and all of that stuff. Yeah, the debonairness definitely they had to put in. The one thing that Sean Connery added was humor, the one-liners, the quippiness, because that's not as much in the novels and isn't as big a part of the character. But he's like, I've got to have some of this stuff. And somebody had said it's like a British screen actor acting like an American leading man.
Oh, that's
an interesting
funny
combination.
That's good. That right there is a good combination. It'll get you a product.
Right. One of the things that did come from it as it's skyrocketing to fame is, in terms of fashion, James Bond is always known as a fashionable figure. But remember, this is 1962. The bikini was not ubiquitous in the general public. Ursula Andress wore it, the classic coming out in the white bikini off of the ocean, and then Daniel Craig, almost a self-referential parody. He's the one in the tight shorts in Casino Royale. But anyways, they're bluish white. Yeah, yeah. But the bikini skyrocketed in sales immediately after this comes out, and some claim that it had the biggest impact on the history of the bikini becoming a staple of women's swimwear is from Dr. No. It became part of culture for that reason.
That's actually pretty incredible. Yeah. The way that stories and images can actually impact and move people. It can create a cultural phenomenon that we're still seeing reverberations today. I mean, the bikini is now a standard. It wasn't in 1962.
Yeah, and this is a part of that. So as we go on, From Russia with Love is next, and this adds Q, the character, because the novels, interestingly, don't have that much equipment. Dr. No, even the film, had no gadgets, just a Geiger counter for radiation was the only thing. But Goldfinger follows From Russia with Love, and the Q character becomes much more of a staple in the gadgets and all of that stuff, because that character doesn't even appear in any of the novels. Q Branch does, but the gadgets are what normal instruments, not sci-fi bleeding edge technology.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the Gatling guns coming out of the headlights of the
car. Right. All of that follows because of what the films are doing. Goldfinger in 1964 is the top of that skyrocketing spike. This is really cementing what this thing is as a film.
Yeah.
Thunderball comes next, and all the legal stuff was settled out of court, but they figured out the deal where McClory gets the screenwriting rights, but they can do the film, and he can make a film based on his script if he wants to, etc.
Gotcha.
So on Thunderball, the one that comes out in the 60s, McClory is the sole producer credit, because that was part of their agreement, even though Broccoli is still working on it. But he's going to come back later to sort of mess things up for them.
Oh, no.
He's just biding his time. This kind of led me to think about spy films, because now we're at the top of the rocket launch as far as
we're
James
four
Bond. 4 in spy films, the 60s.
62, 63, 64, 65. I mean, a movie a year.
Yeah. So spy films, I saw 66, 22 secret agent films alone were released that year.
And that's just at that peak, that very peak, when you were saying it takes off this Connery stuff to the moon peak, and everybody is getting on those coattails. How can we do something like this? Does Mission Impossible come around in this time? When does the original?
So Mission Impossible is 66. It's a TV show.
There we go. Wow. Look how that fits in. So it's right there at the peak. Mission Impossible. Now it's on TV. Now it's coming into your living rooms on your TV set in evenings, mornings. This is really becoming a thing. Basically, the derivatives coming out and getting on the market. It's no wonder that the revenues for the 007 franchise start to go off of a cliff. They still have Connery for a little while, and then it kind of starts to make sense of, when you might say goodbye to him, and start thinking about how you can refresh this. How can you get that money back? Because people are still making money on this genre, but you're not anymore. How'd that happen?
It's kind of also, we'll see a bit of them stealing from their own plate. So we're not done with Connery yet, but let's
I'm just like seeing it all starting to emerge here about 4 movies in.
So here's some of this stuff. The 2 directions. You had mentioned Mission Impossible, which is more the fantastical, tongue-in-cheek adventure, leaning way on that side. But of course, there is a reaction, which is more the John Le Carré serious Cold War thrillers, the spy who came in from the cold and that kind of thing. So that's really the dichotomy. So one of the ones reacting to the portrayal of Bond is the Harry Palmer series, which was 65 to 76, and then there were 2 TV movies after. This was more they called it the thinking man's Bond. Michael Caine plays Harry Palmer. The character is unnamed in the novels. It's based on a book series as well. And this is so funny to me, because they said, we want a dull, unglamorous name. We want to distance ourselves from James Bond. Again, here comes the dull, unglamorous name. But that's what he was in the first place.
Oh, I know.
So Michael Caine suggests, he's like, what about Harry? Now, the producer of this is Harry Saltzman. Also from the James Bond film series, who co-produced the first 9 of them.
What did you just say?
Exactly. He was like, that was the dumbest thing I could have said. You said the most boring, unglamorous, dumb name is Harry. Oh, you're Harry. But they went with it, so...
Oh, I didn't mean... Your name's great.
So, interestingly, Harry Saltzman as producer, they used Ken Adam, who was the designer on 7 of the James Bond films. They used Peter Hunt, who was the editor on 5, and then they used John Barry, who was the composer, who came up with the theme and all that. So, but this was boring. This was the spy stuff that was like the unglamorous, wiretapping kind of stuff. The other, I can't name them all, but similar to Mission Impossible, the only reason I'm bringing this up is because of the connections. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. was the NBC spy series on TV. That started in 64, and then there were 8 films as well.
Wow. Yeah.
Which
also got reboot. I mean, that had a complete reboot not very long ago. So
So the show, they approached Ian Fleming right before his death to
Mhm.
help with this show. He was a little worried because of all of his influence with James Bond, but he gave them ideas. The original name for the main character, Napoleon Solo, was Ian Fleming's idea. So he just must be a great name creator guy.
His names are just spot on.
But it's just crazy. That's the last I'll say about all the iterations in the 60s. But like that all of this is also kind of all the same people pulling from the same basket of apples to come up with all of this.
Right.
As we go on, 67, You Only Live Twice. This is the first film that discards most of the plot of the book that it's based off of.
Oh, really?
It's also the first to have a decline in the box office, like I said, because of this oversaturation of the spy genre,
Yes.
including James Bond itself. Remember how somebody still owns Casino Royale, the rights to it.
Oh, God.
So they're like, well, let's make our Casino Royale. So this comes out.
God.
This comes out the same year, 67, as You Only Live Twice. And this is with David Niven, who Ian Fleming originally wanted as
Whoa.
James Bond.
Whoa.
the original suave, debonair, dandyish guy. It's a spoof comedy. Smersh is the evil organization. Every famous British person, Peter Sellers is in there. Peter O'Toole allegedly just got paid in champagne because he wanted to be in there so bad. Just like, it's kind of like It's a Mad Mad World or Rat Race. It's just really a groovy, silly madness thing.
You Only Live Twice and Casino Royale come out in the same year.
Yeah.
It's
So this
very
is the-
hard to even wrap your head around that.
Yeah. So now Sean Connery, as I said, he's over it. So
Yeah.
69 becomes where here's our inflection point in history, the first shift. Who's it going to be? Why is this happening? There's a ton of reasons, but obviously one of them is Sean Connery saying, I don't want to be typecast. Look at the oversaturation.
Yeah.
He's getting older and more prominent in his career. He wants to do other things. So
This is exactly what happens to Jamie Lee Curtis in horror movies into the 1980s.
oh, really?
It's
Yeah.
very interesting to see, at least in the entertainment business, how we will seize upon what is hot in the moment, what is lucrative in the moment. And everybody gets, okay, now we're doing spy stuff. Everybody, do just buy, all the spy stuff. Well, this exact same trend happened at the back half or in the back end of the 70s and into the 1980s, absolutely spurring the horror, what would you even call it? I mean, the horror scene in the 1980s is
epoch or
insanity.
something. Yeah.
Because everybody's getting in knowing where there's money to be made.
Mhm.
And then how it forces people like Sean Connery or Jamie Lee Curtis to be like, oh no, I got to get out of here.
Right. So he's finally getting out of there, so we think. Dun, dun, dun. We'll see. But on Her Majesty's Secret Service, at least the story, they had written the script. They wanted to do this after Goldfinger. They wanted this story to be the fourth one. But it's not. Thunderball was filmed because they got the rights dispute settled, remember?
Yeah.
So because they wanted that to be the first one. So they're like, we're going to do that. And then On Her Majesty's Secret Service is going to follow that. But just all of the circumstances, weather patterns now, there was a warm Swiss winter. The whole thing takes place in the Alps in the snow. So there's not enough snow for them to film. So they have to postpone it again. And they plan to do Man with the Golden Gun in Cambodia and also use Roger Moore, who comes back later. But here's the two things that happen with that. There's political instability, aka the Vietnam War, that ruled out then filming. And then Roger Moore signed up for another season of his TV series. So all of that in play is like, On Her Majesty's Secret Service it is, and who are we going to get now? Because we wanted Roger Moore, but he can't do it now. So they changed tacks, and as like you're saying, we had somebody who rose to stardom. Let's get not somebody famous, somebody that people don't associate with anything. So they get this guy, George Lazenby, who had no prior acting credits. He was in an ad for a chocolate bar. That's how they saw him.
Hell yeah.
It got mixed reviews at the time, gained more following because it is one of the more realistic, faithful adaptations.
Truly.
For the reason being, the editor, Peter Hunt, who had done the previous 5 films, this is his chance to direct. And it's his only one that he directs. He leaves the series after that. But he wanted to be very faithful to the source material. So virtually everything in the novel occurs in the film. And Yeah, there was
You're making the case for on Her Majesty's Secret Service, man.
Yeah.
Now I'm
I
like,
mean,
this is interesting.
a lot of people didn't like the acting of George Lazenby because it's so
Hmm.
different, and he wasn't an
Mhm.
actor really. He was a model. Like, and
Yeah.
he plays it very differently. He also thought same way that secret agents would be archaic within the next year come the 70s. And so he was like, this is an old dying breed. This is a dinosaur thing. I don't want to do this anymore anyway. So this was the only one that he did as well.
Gotcha.
But the director, Hunt, it was said that he always had the novel in hand on set, and he really
cool.
wanted it to be more like that book. So take it or leave
That's really
it. Most
cool.
people hate it, but it's
I,
just
I,
we're talking
sure.
about the
I mean, but
inflections.
I
Yeah.
like the story of the editor working on all 5 up until that point, and then getting a shot, and then taking it seriously, having the book in hand on set, really making the stride to this is what we're doing, holding up the book. You know.
Yeah.
But
But
I really appreciate that. And it might not have
Yeah.
worked out on all sides,
Yeah.
but I there's something there to be said for that journey, that editor rising to being able to, like, being appreciated, having the opportunity to do that, and then seemingly taking it very seriously.
For sure. So now that is, like I said, the slow U decline of our money graph going down, that one didn't do as well as the previous one. So 1971, Diamonds Are Forever. What are they going to do? They're like, well, we got to go back to what worked. So they say, money is no object. We got to get Sean Connery back.
Give him what he wants.
Massive fee. And they also offered him 2 back-to-back films of his choice because the contempt of his character was also publicized. Like, he was like, well, I don't want to do this anymore, to the press.
Yeah. So they said, you can have whatever fee you name, and we'll do whatever next 2 projects you want.
I don't know if it was whatever fee he named,
But
it was millions, which was massive.
Yeah.
They said, we got to get him. Also, because Roger Moore was still filming something else, so they couldn't get him. Yeah, so
that's crazy. So what I'm seeing here is that before the 70s are ushered in, we've had 3 men play James Bond, and seemingly hardly people even recognize that.
Or 3 in terms of the spoof stuff. Yeah.
That's what I mean. I'm taking it all in. I'm counting David Niven. I'm Casino Royale,
what about
baby.
The original Casino Royale, the 40 minute
Oh,
TV?
no. But was that the 50s?
That was the 50s, yeah.
That was the 50s. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So by the time, so we take it in totality. By the time 1970 comes around, 4 men have played James Bond.
Yeah.
That's
and
kind
for,
of
and,
that's
and
kind
all
of
for the
astounding.
reasons, for so many reasons, from it being warm in the Swiss Alps to somebody already being in a TV show to somebody owning the rights to one that they maybe shouldn't have, or I don't know, Yeah, it's a million different things. So part of this now, though, talking about shifts, is the cultural shift. Americans are fed up, broad strokes, with international operatives. God, the Vietnam War has been going on.
Yeah.
Also, women's rights. The 70s, we're seeing, as George Lazenby is saying, Bond is kind of being a relic. Connery coming back. Like, what are we doing with this thing? Right. Connery definitely declines the next one after Diamonds Are Forever. He's like, I am completely out. So we think. So hold that in mind. So here we are we passed 71. Filmmakers are looking, Broccoli is looking at what's going on in film, in culture. This is the height of the blaxploitation era. Shaft was in 71. We did an episode on that.
Yes.
Very interesting. In comes Roger Moore. He's finally done with his TV shows. They'd been eyeing him. Live and Let Die.
I'm ready for Bond.
And what he brings is a more comedic, lightheartedness, charming. He's more of the debonair playboy who doesn't get hurt. Almost bordering on self-parody at this point. Because, like I said, 70s, big quote from him. He said, to me, the Bond situations are so ridiculous. I mean, this man is supposed to be a spy, and yet everybody knows he's a spy. It's outrageous. You have to treat the humor outrageous as well. This first film also plays on the blaxploitation tropes, a lot of the themes, cliches. First African-American Bond girl does not follow a supervillain. Instead, it's about drug trafficking. I mean, it's still, by our standards, probably in modern times, not up to snuff.
Yeah.
Thematically, misogynistically, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But
it was
reacting
73.
Reacting to what's going on in the 70s, reacting to what's going on in film.
And we really have to put a pin on that. With what they're doing, it's so reactionary. I mean, and I've been trying to put a pin on that anyway in terms of how the industry will jump on things. They only jump on the spy stuff as a reaction to, wow, they made money, we can too.
Yeah.
It's so reactionary. So by the time you're 10 movies into this, Roger Moore is coming in 73.
Yeah.
How do you make this compelling to a modern audience? It's all reactionary. What are people into right now? What are the movies that are selling? We introduced this genre 10 years ago, but we've actually seen a lot of subgenres emerge and a deconstruction of that emerge. The black exploitation genre is not so disconnected from the spy stuff to say that we're not like that. People went to those movies to see that.
Definitely, because Roger Moore, then his slate of films, Man with the Golden Gun, was very much about the oil energy crisis that was taking place in the mid-70s, following Spy Who Loved Me, Moonraker. Star Wars had just come out. Every movie's going to space. How can we put him in space?
Look how reactionary.
Yeah.
James Bond on the moon. No.
Yeah. Octopussy follows in 83. And with this one,
I'm shocked is so late because, again, I'm not a big James Bond person. I'm not seeing most of these movies at all. So that was one I thought was an older one. I really thought there was a Connery 60s deal.
Yeah.
That title is hard to get around.
Well, it's, like I said, Moore is more the debonair playboy, the self-wink and a nod almost. It's almost become Goldmember instead of Goldfinger. Like they know what they're doing.
Can we put it in the title? We can just say it in the title.
We've gotten to that point. So Roger Moore, they were going to be done with him. They were going to get a new person.
Really?
Here comes back our friend Kevin McClory, waiting in the wings. He said, "My new version of Thunderball is ready. It's ready. And you know who I got? Sean Connery. He's going to do it."
No!
Yes. They got him. So this is 1983's Never Say Never Again, a wink and a nod to Sean Connery saying never again, but he got him to do it. So they have to keep Roger Moore for Octopussy because the exact same year, they both come out in 83, Kevin McClory's remake of Thunderball, almost exactly identical because it's the same story, but it's got Sean Connery in it again. He redoes his own thing. Both of those come out in 83.
With the title of it just basically says, you never know.
Yeah. They quadrupled his fee. Sean Connery was paid four times as much. He also
robbed them blind.
Yeah. Also, he's 52 when this movie comes out. God. So this is officially now, I promise you, that was the last one that he did. He is done.
Now that's a good distinction. I believe Daniel Craig is the same age. He's 53. So that's pretty close.
Yeah, that is pretty
Daniel Craig is 53.
So what happens next with this? Roger Moore's last one, A View to Kill, comes out in 85, and he's 57. I believe he's the oldest one.
Wow.
Which is very weird for the time, because if, Evan, film-wise, you think about it, 85, Stallone and Schwarzenegger are on the rise, and this is very different.
Predator comes out.
Yeah.
Predator, Commando, all those movies are coming out right now, then. So the action star is taking off in the back half of the 80s. I mean, absolutely exploding in a way that nobody had ever seen.
And so Moore's 57-year-old sort of womanizer, old guard of the Cold War. It's weird in a way.
Yeah.
Pitting him up against that.
Yeah, that would be weird.
Here comes historical inflection point. We've got to get another James Bond. We've seen the action stuff is popping. So 87, here we get Timothy Dalton. And
much less familiar with him.
Yeah, so more to the original character. Darker, cold, ruthless, very little humor, focused killer, less of a womanizer. All the action kind of stuff, but even more to the original book stuff. He doesn't have really many one-liners. Lacks, the sex appeal and charm of the books, which is why, and Sean Connery and so on. And he was a stage actor. Timothy Dalton was mostly.
So where are we in the financial graph that you asked?
Still declining.
We're in that. We're going down. we're still down, right? 87?
Correct. 87. Yeah, we're still going down. So that's the first one he does. And then does License to Kill 2 years later, 89. This has the lowest box office gross of any. We're at the bottom of the U. Because people are not liking how he's doing James Bond. They're not liking the gritty realism. They don't want any of that stuff. He only gets 2. And this is potentially, this has run its course. Maybe James Bond is over here, because they had a 3-film deal with Timothy Dalton. So he was supposed to do another one. There's legal disputes between MGM and Broccoli's company, who owns the rights, because MGM is merging with a larger international thing, and the broadcasting rights change, and there's suits and countersuits, and it's a mess for 6 years.
Yeah.
Dalton's contract expires because he also has a time limit to it. It's not 3 films whenever we decide. It's 3 films over the course of this many years. So he said, I'm out. I have no obligation to do this. So much time has passed. No, thank you. But they're now saying, what can we do different? We've had such a lapse in time, and clearly he's old news. Now, 95, Pierce Brosnan comes back in.
That's a big gap compared to what they were doing. When they started out doing a movie a year, they basically do a movie a year through the 60s. You go into the 70s, and it's a little bit spottier, but they're still doing it every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And through the 80s, it's about similar. You hit 89, and it stops like it's a red light.
They had
to go from 89 to 95. I mean, that's the biggest gap, and it's the biggest gap by a large margin.
Yeah, so it could have ended there. This new one, GoldenEye, with Pierce Brosnan, is the first one produced by Broccoli's daughter, Barbara. So perhaps, and definitely,
the changing of the guard.
She's bringing new stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's also the first.
And you have to. Yeah. It's the only you have to. The generational stuff. I'm hot on that in thematics these days, and it's no coincidence we're talking about it with James Bond right now with Daniel Craig in No Time to Die. But the generational stuff is so important. The changing of the guard, the letting go and embracing the new. It's such an important thing that I would love for us to put more focus on in our culture right now. So this is fascinating. So the daughter, Broccoli.
Because he died a year later. Yeah. So she's taking it over.
In to breathe new life into this thing.
It's a lot of firsts. So Brosnan adds the suave and elegance back that Dalton didn't have, and the wit, the comedy stuff, but also grittiness on occasion. It's a bit more when it comes to the fighting and whatnot, but it also, like you're saying, the changing the guard, changing at times, they can't make it as overtly sexual and sexist. This is the first female M. She says Bond is a sexist.
People don't want that. People want they want James Bond to evolve with them.
Right.
It's like a good band you get into in high school. Yeah. They evolve with you.
Pierce Brosnan said, I will not smoke. It causes cancer, so he doesn't smoke anymore.
Good for him.
Which was a big point. But, it's the 90s, so everything in context. The women in it potentially are still treated as sex objects or damsels in distress. Definitely. It's a lot of lip service as well to it, but it
starts to get a little Inspector Gadget too, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah, so this is the first not to use any story elements from the novels. They're done with any
going
of the
out
novels.
On their own.
Yeah, and it's also framed post-Cold War, so it's all about weapons of mass destruction. That's what's popping at the time. So that's GoldenEye in 95.
I'm looking at all the titles right here. One surface level thing that is jumping out at me. I think Pierce Brosnan's movies have the best titles.
They seem the most
Tomorrow
coherent.
Never Dies. The World Is Not Enough. Die Another Day. I mean, it's great. Yeah. GoldenEye sounds like it's a Connery film. So right off the bat, you kind of get that with Goldfinger, Thunderball, those one-word ones, Dr. No. I would say Sean Connery's run, obviously the classics there.
Yeah.
But when you look at what these titles are, I love what they're doing in the Pierce Brosnan run. The Daniel Craig titles are not as good. No Time to Die sounds like a Pierce Brosnan run.
Right. Anyway, that's what I thought too. Yeah. It's interesting because not based on anything from the novels or short stories or anything. So GoldenEye is an original name. It was the name of his estate, and it was the name of the operation that he did in World War II.
Sick.
But it's not. So they are coming up with new names, not based on the source material.
Now it's eclipsed itself. Now it's got this whole universe, basically. Now it's, I mean, it's well bigger than Star Wars in terms of just like the material there. In terms of film-wise, by now, there's so many books that go up to. Now you can start to play in the sandbox and create yours instead of having to stick to the book on set on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Now you really, this is what James Bond has been. This is what he has served to do. How can we give him a function in the modern day?
Yeah.
I think really behooved them.
Right, because like I said, License to Kill was the lowest, and then GoldenEye, we're going back up the U curve now.
Yeah.
We're everything after this is rising in a
We're getting
general
some
trend.
attention, baby. They piece them together. You
Yeah,
know, that's
yeah.
what I'm seeing is 95, 97, 99,
Mhm.
2002. That
Yeah.
we're back in those 2-3 year gaps, appropriate gaps to actually sit down and figure out what story you're telling.
Exactly. I loved what you were saying about being open to messing with the material. You have sort of a sandbox. I wanted to take a diversion, but it's very, very merited. 2 years
Mhm.
after GoldenEye comes out in 97. Now, what is popular also, inflecting on culture, like the bikini, video games,
Mm.
huge. GoldenEye 007 is the third best selling Nintendo 64 game of all time.
I
It
still hear about this game on probably a yearly basis. There's still some actual legitimate reference to this game.
Yeah,
People
pop
mention it.
culture.
People loved it. I never had it. I never even
Right.
played the thing, but I have heard about this game every year of my life.
Well, and here's the thing for those that don't know video games. First person shooters where it looks like you're holding the gun and pointing at stuff, that was mostly on PCs. This really showed that consoles, the Nintendo 64 was
Yes.
one of the newer ones that could even do the 3D graphics that they needed, could have this. One of the biggest things, though, that it revolutionized, paved the way for so much is multiplayer split screen, meaning 4 people on one screen and you each have your own little box and you're all playing against each other. This
The
was the first one to
emergence.
do it. This paves the way. Halo, Call of Duty, everything
Yes.
now
Yes.
is
Yes.
multiplayer. So it's crazy that it came from James Bond. I don't even
Think about the
connect
world
the two
that it
together.
opened up,
Mhm.
dude. I mean, it's
Yeah.
absolutely incredible. I mean, now you're thinking GoldenEye. Now they've got the license to kill. Now they got the
Yeah.
license to play. Uh, he's way more techie. He's modernly conscious. He's not smoking. All these kind of all the tech
Yeah.
stuff fits right into what they're doing with video games. It makes the character fresh again. Now you're getting instead of it being kind of like an adult drinking, and now you're getting kids involved. Now you're taking kids on spy missions in a video game. This is cutting edge. This is compelling stuff. This is
Yeah.
where people are going to throw their dollars.
Well, and it didn't turn James Bond into a video game property, but it did set the stage.
It's crazy to even like purport that, but it seems to be at least tangentially true. I mean,
But again, it's the producers.
Really.
I read that, Broccoli and the other producers, they said, use all our assets, use all the films, do all this. It doesn't have to be just based on the GoldenEye movie, because it came out 2 years after it was just the most popular branding of James Bond was GoldenEye.
Yeah.
So that's the title they used. But
it's almost interesting based on the success of that. And it's not a success that I think has ever waned with the audience that it impacted, that it didn't spur more James Bond video games. In fact, now that I look at this, I'd be like, maybe James Bond actually would be like well told if you were living it as a video game.
Well, they did announce an original one. I forget who the publisher is, but it's going to be, they announced it in November of 2020 that they're working on an original James Bond game, not affiliated.
Well, it's about time. I love that. Yeah. Great idea. Fantastic. Send me a check.
Yeah.
No, that's a great idea. I'm thinking about these types of stories, the adventure that it takes you on, how video games have grown, leaps and bounds, created new, absolute, real realities. So now to think that James Bond hasn't really had a step in that since really we got going with first-person shooters and stuff. Yeah. It's time to bring him back into that.
There's been a couple, but
idea.
it hasn't been nearly to the level that other full-on properties have been. Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah, no, I was tickled to read about that and refresh myself and be like, oh yeah, he changed video games forever. Yeah.
Yeah, by the way.
Yeah. So back to the films, the great titles, Tomorrow Never Dies, The World's Not Enough, Die Another Day, the Pierce Brosnan stuff. Finding, even though they're making money, the critical reception is not up to snuff. They're too campy. The CGI is crazy. The gadgets, maybe just too far.
He's a bit too Batman
bordering
now,
on parody. Yeah, exactly. And so
he's just like Batman. And this is happening concurrently with the Schumacher Batmans, actually. It's happening with the same character, the same type of thing, the same. And it makes sense. That's the 90s edge that both would be barking up those trees and be so closely linked almost tonally.
It's fascinating. Here comes the new kind of wave of what people want. Remember, we talked about the two different types of spy stories. the one who comes in from the cold in Mission Impossible. Well, Bourne comes out the exact same year as Die Another Day, 2002. So the tide is changing where
Wow,
people want
yes.
maybe that gritty, shaky cam. Really,
Mhm.
that revolutionized a lot of stuff.
That comes out in 2002, and I think that
Mhm.
the Broccoli family and all the other producers are sitting back and thinking about what a white-led, spy action thriller looks like taken seriously.
Right.
Because I think that absolutely served as the most prominent modern prototype for what they would do next.
So they're seeing that Bourne and all of that stuff. What better way than Casino Royale, the origin, Batman Begins, like you're talking
Take it
about.
all
It's like,
back, baby.
how can we do this again? But they don't have the rights. These fools over here still have the
Oh
rights to it.
god.
It's the one thing they don't have the rights for. So right around the time of The World Is Not Enough, so not quite the when he's done, but Sony Pictures is the one that ended up with it. They give them the rights in exchange for, get this, Spider-Man. So they gave Spider-Man to Sony in exchange for
Oh my
Casino
god.
Royale in around 99 or 98. And
Oh
look what
wow.
they act on it, and Lord have mercy.
That's
But I
incredible.
didn't know that
At
at all,
that
but yeah.
time, actually, James Cameron is attached. He actually wrote
Oh,
a couple drafts of that movie, and that's
uh-huh.
exactly when he was attached to it. So that's fascinating to see how those major properties are changing hands right there.
Switched. Yeah, because Sony could have helped. I mean, they could have done without the Casino Royale rights, but they wanted them because it was the only one they hadn't done, you know?
Yeah, so they get him around 2000, right?
Correct. Yeah, a little before. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
very cool,
So
very cool.
that moves us finally to, I love how all of this is making sense in terms of film history, cultural history, everything.
Yeah.
2006, Casino Royale. He's blonde. He's rugged.
He's a blunt object.
Yeah, just look at the history of James Bond also in the history of everything going on. Front page news for the Daily Mirror in the UK. It said the name's Bland, James Bland. They hate,
Oh!
but then praised for bringing it into the modern era. He
Yeah.
he is more what Ian Fleming devised him as, a charming, cold-hearted killing machine
Blunt
that is also
object.
a swine who needs to change his ways, or that.
Yeah.
That is very much. And you can
I
speak to this because you have now seen these.
I have these. Okay, so I've seen some of the Pierce Brosnan films in
Mhm.
passing as a child. I've hardly ever seen any of the others. Forgive me. I will be starting with John Connery's. Starting with number one and going
Yeah,
through
yeah.
them. But I have seen all of the Daniel Craigs basically in succession of when they were released, or relatively so.
Uh-huh.
And it's so interesting that setup conversation with Jason Bourne. I think they looked at that movie and they thought, well, what about this is compelling? What about this has people intrigued? It's
Yeah.
not that we're going to exotic countries and jumping through windows. It's that there was actually a very good mystery at the bottom of who Jason Bourne was,
Right.
why he was in the middle of this. And I think that this is where they actually start putting together a James Bond that has something to say, that actually has an arc, that has meaning throughout all of the films, not just one on its own as a pedestal. What are we going to do in this one? Now they
Like a
start thinking
sitcom.
of this
Yeah.
this really as a serial character, and we're going to carry this character to the next one and to the next one. I think it's one of the most successful turns of a character you could point to. It's so heartbreaking to even think about the reaction of when Daniel Craig was cast, James Bland, because it's these things happen. People disagree with casting choices all the time. I mean, look no further than Heath Ledger and
Right.
The Dark Knight. I think that a lot of people are confused about maybe what they've done with the character compared to everything the character has been.
Right.
I think it's the only way forward for a character like this, because without getting to the root of being able to relate at all to this man, I don't understand what he has to give. If you have nothing left to give, you are irrelevant. And that is said in the new movie. And talk about a movie with something to say.
I loved what you said about Jason Bourne being somebody where you're trying to figure out who he is, because he's Bond for a long time is a distraction, the escapist thing. Right. But people see him also in a way as a reflection of society, where it's like Ian Fleming wrote for the largest audience of 1952, where he's misogynist and womanizing and smokes and drinks all the time. And that was appealing to a broad audience that would want to see these films. Yeah, but now it doesn't.
More and different people are going to the movies.
And it also doesn't mean that that has to be a piece of his character. It's not just an aspect of the time, like
Right.
the new Batman is not going to be misogynistic because Batman's views on women is not a part of his character. Like it it
Yeah.
follows with the times, but it's interesting that people like latch on to certain aspects because that was what it was for the time. But even Ian Fleming was saying, he said he's a healthy, violent, non-cerebral man in his mid-30s and a creature of his era. That's how
Yeah.
he described him. So it's like, if the author is saying that.
No, it seems to me that they hit an incredible reset after the most amazing rebound through the 90s. They rebounded, and then they had the clear enough mind to move this character into the 21st century. If we want to keep making these movies, we have to find out a way to make him relevant. And the only way you can make this character relevant is if we can relate to him or intrigued by him and his real self at all. So I think a lot of people are confused when they say, like, why are you digging into James Bond and his backstory? And I was like, because otherwise there is no story.
Because we have
I
seen,
think,
yeah, like you
yeah,
said, we have seen smashing through windows, and we have seen exotic
yes,
locales is kind of offensive too, because it's like, but like we're so global now. It's not like, oh my God, he's going
right.
to this foreign land. Like
That was amazing in the 60s.
yeah.
Right now, it's like, so what? It's like, what do you have to say? If you
Mhm.
have nothing left to give, you're irrelevant. Your set piece is not what I'm really here for. I mean, I get that feels like major pieces of it, and they want, yeah. James Bond has some formula,
Escapist quality. Yeah. Yeah.
right? but if we again, they tried just doing it over and over again, and it fell off a cliff, and it took a long time to build that back. You
Yeah.
can't just recycle this over and over again without actually expanding it. And by the time we get to No Time to Die, I'm feeling things for James Bond as a character that I did not know was possible.
Yeah.
Why am I feeling so much about this character by the end of this film? Because this film actually, I felt, had something so important to say. Again, I'll go back to that generational stuff. I think
Yeah.
our culture could use a little bit of taste of moving on and appreciating things for what they were good for, and
Yeah.
then making something new. We are now more fuller humans than we were. We have grown. We have learned so much over the course of the existence of this character.
Yeah.
We can't do it the way it's been done.
And hopefully 3 James Bonds from now, we will be like, look at Daniel Craig and how
Yeah,
out of touch that was, like that.
exactly. I really now am looking to the stars to see, and now that I'm realizing, oh, I'm invested. I like Daniel Craig. I think that's my idea of James Bond. He's my James Bond. What are they going to do next? Now I'm in that fold, baby. I'm invested. They found an incredible spot to lay it down and
Yeah.
say, wow, what an amazing run. We're going to make this worth something, worthwhile. We're going to make this compelling and emotional.
Part of me also thinks, because we've now hit this end of sort of the gritty reboot syndrome of everything,
Right.
and maybe audiences are tired of that. Maybe there will be more of an escapist. I don't know. It's just interesting to think about where, if they're responding to what audiences are or are not doing, will we see another round of that, or will there be a dip once people get sick of that, or will it be able to be merged in a way?
This is a very
That
interesting thing,
satisfies.
and that I think the Broccoli family and all those producers have been trying to understand. It's been their lot in life to try to understand, well, where are people's interests right now?
Yeah.
I bet they've got a plan, I bet they've got a plan.
So they've already thought about
and I
it,
don't.
yeah.
I think a lot of people were concerned, is like, oh, they're going to make James Bond is going to be, Jamie Bond or something like that. I don't think that's exactly where they're going
Right,
with it. I
right.
know on the last episode we were talking more about, like, again, and in this generational letting go of letting things be what they were good for. That's what this movie does for me, is like, well, James Bond and what he is good for is really, we've aged out of a lot of it. This is that good moment to say goodbye. What
Yeah.
pieces of the character might we be saying goodbye to that we've not really come to terms with yet? Will we hear the music again? Like, it's all up for grabs here about what this character will look like going forward. I think the industry saw what happened with Ghostbusters, and we're like, you can't just change the the gender and like audiences will think that's fine and go. Like, I don't think that's going to happen here. That's not what happened in No Time to Die for anybody
It
that
has
was
to be
scared about, like, oh, he's going to be a woman, James Bond. That's not where they leave it. And I think they've got way more tricks up their sleeve than to just go like, hey, it's going to be a woman now. I think that would be really underestimating them.
Yeah. So we don't know. We'll see.
What do you think they'll do?
Please reach out to us at IlliteratePod on Instagram. If you love this, if you hated this, if you want more of this type of multi-part series, this was a blast for us to look at. And
yeah, thank you guys for sticking with us. Thank you, Taylor, for all this incredible research. It's a blast to be able to go through something, a timeline like this. I mean, such a robust timeline. Your research and your work cannot be appreciated enough. Thank you guys for listening to us. Really, get in touch with us. What do you think about the Bond movies? Where do you think they're going next? What's your favorite? We'd love to start a conversation with you about these things, because there will be another Bond movie, and so it's all up for guests right now. We just thank you for being here. Check us out at IlliteratePod on Instagram. Message us. Let us know what you're reading, what you're excited for coming out of the theaters or in TV. You never know when we'll do an episode that is all about something you want to know. And we will catch you next week like we always do.